universality and relativity are presented as if they were opposites. All right, but I'm going to argue that, in fact, the primary sense of universality is fully compatible with considerable relativity. And that if this is the case, then the issue becomes not whether something is relative or universal, but how something that is universal in some important senses is also relative in other no less important senses.
It's very difficult now to say that there is a fundamental contradiction between states. States that earlier had very entrenched positions in terms of human rights, and I'm going to use two notable examples there, the United States of America in relation to economic, social, and cultural rights, and China in relation to civil and political rights. If you see where those states have come now, well, it still may not be as far as some of us would want to, but it is considerably further than we were 30 or 40 years ago.
National overlapping consensus on the body of internationally recognized human rights has in fact emerged. That more and more proponents of more and more comprehensive doctrines from more and more regions of the world have come to see in human rights a political expression of their deepest values.
So what we see is that states are not fundamentally disagreeing about, well, are there human rights there? But very often when it comes down to the scope of those rights in practice, that's where we see the real challenges are. When it comes to actual implementation of those human rights, that's where we see the real challenges are.
Wat me opviel bij beide sprekers, die zeggen, kijk, er is natuurlijk ruimte voor lokale implementatie, maar daar zit ook een probleem.
Die zei die Donnelly dat die local accountability, dat het veel belangrijker is dan die internationale accountability. Dus de verantwoordelijkheid afleggen door staten aan hun bevolking, dat is eigenlijk democratie.
So this is a very high-level discussion on matters which touch the realities of human beings also. And that makes it fascinating.
Two very dynamic speeches actually, and I learned a lot of things about universality, certainly a lot of things to reflect about.
There are many social institutions they are using to implement human rights which might not be obvious to a lawyer, but they're very obvious to anthropologists and sociologists. And what you then see is that these states tend to dig in because we challenge them on their implementation, and instead of challenging them, we should applaud them and compliment them.
Development worlds, the organizations have been working for the past 50 years exactly in the areas you've been pointing out. And I'm excited and delighted that finally that has been discovered.
But if you talk about law in the sense of human rights law, you want the laws, you want the legislation, you want the rules to be something you can use as an agent of change.
Universality is not something to reach by transferring and teaching and trying to convince others. It is from within that we have to look at that. And it's therefore that I believe that the question of universality is so important.
I don't think human rights, the whole human rights agenda is irrelevant, or the promotion, and of course the fact that states ratify and laws, I think that's wonderful. I think the debate at some point, we've reached a point where we've gone all the way up this curve. I think from here forward, further debate is much less relevant than building robust institutions. That's the point I'm making, actually.
Obviously, human rights are universal, and what we see now is that many states actually recognize human rights at the very broad level, and there's a lot of acceptance of that, and we see that many more states are engaging on these issues.
When it comes to values, what we're finding is that the changes are actually bringing people closer together, that they're discovering that their old traditions are actually much closer to one another than we thought before, largely because we're in a globalized world facing very, very similar kinds of problems. So that people see themselves living lives that are much more like each other than they were 50 or 100 years ago.
I think the real challenge today in terms of universal applicability of human rights is actually gaps in implementation.